This year, we spent Thanksgiving with my wife's family. For the past 18 years, it had always been at our house. But now that the boys were gone, things had changed. Josh went to Alabama and Jordan chose Auburn. I think they did it on purpose, just so there would always be an ongoing conflict in the family. It was kind of traditional and always fun. I spent the last 15 years working as an insurance claims adjuster, and I absolutely hated it. I always wanted to do something outdoors and manual labor. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to work behind a desk anymore. My family situation made me a slave to my job. Connie had never worked. Over the past few years, the boys have been very active in sports and other activities. I have become an involved parent, and Connie has been more reserved but supportive. As I spend more time with the boys, she spends more time with her parents. Connie's parents were in their late 60s. They were still in good health, but they were beginning to feel the stress of aging. Every couple years they spent Thanksgiving at our house, but we never went to theirs. It was expected to be a very relaxing weekend. The weather was beautiful, so the 2-hour drive went pretty well. Connie's dad and I enjoyed chatting while Connie and her mom were busy making dinner. It was just the four of us, and it went pretty well. The food was delicious and the company pleasant. Frank, Connie's dad, and I were looking forward to a long evening of soccer and cold beer. Connie's mom just wanted to be left alone with her new Patterson novel. "John, if you don't mind, I'm going to go spend the day with Harriet Miller from high school. I haven't seen her in over 10 years. Will you and Daddy be okay?" "We'll be fine, honey. Stay as long as you want, but don't drink alcohol." I smiled and waved as I walked her to the door. Connie's mother, Teresa, was just finishing cleaning up when I grabbed a couple of fresh long necks for myself and Frank. "Where did Connie run off to, John?" "I think she said she was going to visit an old friend, Harriet Miller, I believe." "That's nice. She'll probably be there most of the evening." She smiled at me strangely. She said she'd be back later in the evening. It was a leisurely, quiet evening. Teresa was cozying up with her book in the living room, and Frank and I were trying to catch up on soccer games, but to no avail. "John, could you get a couple beers out of the fridge? I think we need to have a little talk." When I got back, Frank had just closed the door between the study and the living room. "What do you want to talk about, Frank?" "First of all, I think you should know that Harriet Miller died of colon cancer about 6 months ago. I have no idea why Connie said she was going to visit her. She might as well have picked the name of someone who didn't die." I didn't react to what he said. "I'm not sure, but I think it's a joke between Connie and her mother. They seem to have some little secrets that I'm not privy to." "You mean there's something shitty going on that I don't know about?" "That's right. It's been going on for the last 5 years or so. That's why Connie's been visiting us so much." "What exactly are you trying to say? I'm a little confused." "When Connie comes to visit us lately, she doesn't stay here. I don't know where she goes, but I've been very specifically told to keep my nose out of it." "You're saying Connie's doing something she shouldn't be doing and her mother's helping her do it?" "I knew you were a smart guy." I finished my beer and we both began to feign interest in playing ball. We didn't talk about it again. Time was running out. Frank started to peck his nose, and I caught myself wondering what my wife was really up to. I pulled out my cell phone and started playing. Connie had turned off her Find My Phone app. I fiddled with it for a while, but to no avail. I didn't try to call her, but assumed her phone was still on. I wondered how these police officers always managed to find a cell phone, and I couldn't. I made fresh coffee. Frank fell asleep in his chair. Teresa covered him with a blanket when he went to bed. Connie finally came home. "So, how was Harriet?" I tried to say it with a nonchalant look. "She's fine. They've remodeled the whole house, now that their kids are gone. It looked nice. The problem is that I drank too much wine. I shouldn't have driven home." I didn't answer. "John, I'm really tired. I'm going to take a quick shower and go to bed. We'll talk in the morning, okay?" I filled the thermos with fresh coffee. I also slipped Connie's cell phone into my pocket. As I walked out the door, I heard Frank whisper, "Go get 'em, Tiger." I didn't understand what he meant, but it brought a smile to my face. There was no real plan, so I just sat there waiting for the engine to warm up. Eventually, I decided to try to use the GPS system in the car. for what it was worth, I hoped to get something out of it other than finding the nearest McDonald's. I went to the history section of the Navigator and selected bead crumbs. Yes, it was all there. I had a nice little line of red dots showing me where my loving wife was that day. I had no idea where Harriet lived, but it didn't matter. All I had to do was follow the yellow brick road. I mean the road with the red dots. 15 minutes later, I was in a small, modest neighborhood in front of a small brick house with a one-car garage. This had to be the place because the dots here had turned around and were starting to come back. I pulled out my phone and went into Google Maps. It took some manipulation, but after a few minutes I realized I was right in front of 321 David Drive. If I had known what I was doing, I could have figured out everything else in a matter of minutes. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did stumble upon it and learned that the house belonged to Henry Parker. Henry Parker was Connie's high school friend and, if I remember correctly, even took her to the prom. So she visited an old friend and spent some time with him. That doesn't necessarily mean they spent the afternoon actively having sex. That may have been the case, but I had no proof. All I had was enough to make my marriage a little upset. I hated shit halfway through. I was going to just go back to the house, but at the last minute, I decided to keep picking up breadcrumbs. It turned out to be the right decision. It seems Connie didn't go straight to Henry's house. She stopped at a local drugstore that was on the way. So what could I do with this information? I turned on the interior lights in the car and looked around for an empty paper bag or receipt. I found nothing. Connie, of course, was a person of habit. She never paid cash. She took everything with a credit card. I turned on her phone and clicked on the MasterCard icon. It worked just like it was supposed to. My purchase history took me right to the pharmacy, and I immediately got a copy of the purchase that was made at 3:45 p.m. today. My loving wife bought a package of condoms for $7, $89, and a tube of lube for $10, $77. There were 12 condoms in that package. I hope she didn't waste her money. Now I had enough information. I could go home, but there were a few other things I needed to do. First, I saved a copy of the pharmacy receipt in JPG format. Then I went into my phone's settings. I wasn't very good at this kind of thing, but I kept going until I had the upper hand. I saved the receipt picture as my wallpaper. I then set it as the default for her phone. Now, whenever she opens her phone, it will be the first thing that pops up. I'm sure she will have no problem getting rid of it, but not before she realizes that I am fully aware of what she has done. I also sent myself a copy of this picture. 20 minutes later, I returned to the house. Frank was still asleep in his chair. I assumed Teresa was upstairs in bed and my loving wife was sound asleep in the guest room. I quietly gathered all my things and went down the stairs. I placed Connie's cell phone on the kitchen table along with my wedding ring. There was no note. I didn't feel it was necessary. I was ready to walk out the door when I saw my father-in-law in the doorway. "How'd it go, John?" "Just as you expected." He smiled and waved me lightly. 5 hours later, I was home. Another 5 hours later, I was on my way to Florida. No more shitty work. No more shitty weather and no more cheating wife. I was tempted to stop and see the boys, but I decided not to. For some strange reason, I ended up in Baldwin County, Alabama, instead of Florida. It seems that there are hundreds of abandoned mobile homes in the surrounding area. Retirees buy mobile homes and then die. Their heirs then have to continue to pay the lot and utility bills until they are sold. Sometimes this takes years, so there were many rental options available. Within a week, I had a new address, a new driver's license, and a new bank account. All of my Pennsylvania accounts were closed. After filing my declaration of residence, I contacted Alabama and Auburn to change the boys' status to residents. I transferred all the money out of all the accounts and even the boys' college funds. Since I'm a good guy, I paid off all credit cards before closing them. Connie still had a Kohl's card. I canceled Connie's home and car insurance. The car was in her name, as was her cell phone. I was going to cancel the utility bill, but I changed my mind at the last minute. I wasn't hiding, but I didn't let anyone know where I was. I won't bore you with describing all the other chores that were necessary. You have heard the story 100 times already. I called each of the boys and explained the situation as best I could without sounding like a jerk. They weren't happy and didn't understand, but seemed to accept it. I got a job at the Escambia shipyard scraping boat hulls. They weren't interested in taking me on officially because of insurance, so I ended up having to work illegally. It didn't matter because I didn't care if anyone found me. I wasn't breaking any laws. I got a $10 a month membership to the nearest Planet Fitness Center. I had no desire to sign up for the gym, but I needed a good place to shower after work. The bathroom facilities in the rental trailer were barely adequate. After showering, I usually ate outside of the house or took something with me. The routine quickly settled down and I was a happy camper. "Frank, it's me, John. Just thought I'd stop by and see how things were going." "Hey, kid. Good to hear from you. How long has it been? Almost 4 months?" "Almost. I've been busy and I just got settled. My phone has been off most of that time. I only turn it on when I need to use it, mostly to order takeout." "So, what the hell are you doing?" "I rented a small mobile home and got a job at one of the local boatyards. I've already lost almost 10 pounds and I'm not even on a diet. The boys are coming for spring break. I'm looking forward to seeing them, but I don't want to explain why I left. We'll see how things work out." "Well, I'm glad to hear you're doing well. It's all gone to shit around here. Has your wife been in touch with you?" "Frank, I haven't heard from her. I haven't gotten any messages on my phone. In fact, I expected to be inundated with stupid calls, but I didn't get any. The only messages I got were spam calls. What the hell was going on?" I could hear Frank laughing on the other end of the line. "John, you're not going to believe this. Connie and her mother actually celebrated for a whole week after you left. The first thing Teresa did was take your wedding picture off the mantelpiece and put up an old picture of Connie and Henry going to the prom. I didn't even know she kept that picture. Well, I expected some kind of rift, but not this. I guess everyone's happy now." "Well, not exactly. The chickens were back on the roost, so to speak, when Connie came home. She couldn't even pay the utility bills, let alone the mortgage. It all went to hell pretty fast. The house would be repossessed by the bank next month. She still owed on the utilities. Heck, she can't even pay the bill at Kohl's." "How's she living?" "She was going to move in with us, but at the last minute she decided to move in with Henry. I was relieved about that. She was angry that you closed all the bank accounts, but not angry enough to contact you about it. Henry seems more than willing to support her." Frank and I chatted for a few more minutes. I promised to call again when the boys got back to school. I had mixed emotions about the whole thing. On the one hand, I was happy that I had gotten away with it, but on the other hand, I was a little upset that she had absolutely no remorse. I must have done something wrong. The boys stayed for a week, but honestly, they spent most of their time in Gulf Shores or Panama City Beach. They refused to enter into any discussions about marriage. They said Connie called each of them once, told them I had left and gave no further explanation. They never heard from her again. They were happy to hear that I would still be able to pay their tuition. I told them to get a driver's license in Alabama and to use my address. I had no personal life. I didn't go to bars. All the waitresses at the restaurants I frequented were either too young, too old, or too desperate. I started working out a bit at the fitness center just because I was bored and looking for something to do. However, it wasn't at all what you read about in erotic stories. Of course, there wasn't much going on where I lived either. I think 90% of my neighbors were on welfare. I became addicted to YouTube videos. It's been 2 years. No one ever knocks on my door, especially on Sunday mornings. Eventually, I decided I had to find out who it was, just to shut them up. It was Frank. Damn it, Frank! How the hell did you find me? I stopped on the way here and saw Jordan. He gave me directions. I couldn't find Josh. You got a cold beer for a weary traveler? It's 6 o'clock in the morning. Wouldn't you rather have coffee? You got some? I had enough groceries on hand to make a pretty good breakfast, one of my many shortcomings. We chatted and ate for a while before I asked the big question. What the hell are you doing here? I was having a little trouble and felt it was time to leave the Keystone State. I didn't answer. Frank leaned back in his chair a little and tried to get comfortable. Connie and Henry were married Saturday morning. I didn't even realize I was divorced. That's interesting, but it didn't seem like a reason to leave. While everyone was at church, I went and burned down Henry's house. Now that seems very interesting. How'd it go? I don't know. I didn't see them after that. Well, now that you're here, I guess they'll just have to move in with Teresa right now. I don't think so. I gave him an inquiring look. I burned down my own house just before I left. And then another surprise. Josh and Jordan showed up. What had I done to deserve this visit? Frank and I helped them drop off their bags. We were actually trying to figure out where Grandpa had disappeared to. That was my best guess. Josh thought he was going to Mexico. I take it you were both at the wedding? Yes, it was awesome. It wasn't what we expected. Jordan looked like he was trying to keep from laughing. Frank nudged me with his elbow. John, I think your boys are playing a joke on us. I got 4 beers out of the fridge. So, how do you like your new stepfather? That made them both giggle. What the hell's so funny? They never got married, Dad. In the middle of the ceremony, someone called to say Henry's house was on fire. It stopped when he ran out to see what was going on. By the time things had settled down, we found out that Grandma and Grandpa's house was on fire, too. Mom kept trying to get Henry to finish the ceremony, but finally he got angry, yelled that the wedding was off, and ran out. We had no place to stay, so we drove straight here. So they never got married? No. Josh and Jordan stayed with us for a few days and then went back to school. A few people showed up to make inquiries about Frank, but I was able to redirect them to Ocala. After a few weeks, they stopped coming. Frank got a job at a building materials store, and life became much more interesting. He was a little more outgoing than I was, so in a short period of time, I really started to have that personal life. Out of nowhere, we started going to cooking classes, bar parties, and birthday parties. We even got invited to funerals and a couple weddings. It was there that I met Argie Sue Baker. Argie was a divorced woman who worked in the gardening department of a building supply store with Frank. After running into her a few times at different events, we sort of became a couple. One thing followed another, and 6 months later she moved into a trailer with me after Frank moved out. He found a rich widow who had an apartment in Orange Beach. Argie and I didn't get married, but we bought the trailer together. She talked me into quitting my job at the shipyard, and now we both work at a building materials store. Isn't love beautiful?